Welcome to my Healing Through Love series, where I introduce you to some beautiful and amazing men and women who have personally healed and have helped others to heal through love. This is about healing from and even because of facing and overcoming challenging life issues, physical and emotional dis-ease, trauma, fears, and insecurities on the way to rediscovering, recreating, and finally living your passion, creativity, joy, and ultimately love for yourself and others. Hi, I'm Dr. Erica Goodstone, Healing Through Love mentor. To me, this is not only about what you have accomplished, but also about the kind of person you have to be and become to help others heal through your love. So today, I'm absolutely delighted to be interviewing my longtime friend and colleague, Dr. Laurie Nadel. We met many years ago for the first time in an elevator when we were both speaking at the New Life Expo in New York City. I can attest to the fact that Dr. Laurie is a living example of excellence in action. At every turn, she manages to face her problems head on, to not dwell on her own misfortunes, and to use every unfortunate circumstance to help herself and others become stronger, more resilient, and more capable of helping others to heal through love. Dr. Laurie has been a Reiki master since 2002, and for decades she has studied numerous healing modalities, including hypnosis, shamanism, remote healing, homeopathic remedies, trauma healing, end-of-life doula practices, and so much more. Currently, she helps humans and their animals to improve their relationships, to heal, and to help you and your animal family get ready to say goodbye. So I'm delighted, and I would like you to welcome my friend and colleague, Dr. Laurie Nadel.
Thank you, Dr. Erica. It is really an honor and a pleasure to be here with you, and thank you for that lovely introduction. I wrote a piece about Dr. Erica for the Huffington Post, and you can look it up. It's called Hey, Amy Schumer, Meet Dr. Erica. And it's been an honor and a privilege to be a colleague and friend and collaborator over the years. So I think this is a wonderful idea to do a Healing Through Love series because, when people ask me, what's your favorite song? These days, I always say it's All We Need Is Love by the Beatles, because we really need love. I mean, we are really in a very conflicted and turbulent cycle. And what's more important than healing through love and empathy than what we need right now?
And, and also, what I'm realizing is that we may not in the moment be able to do something bigger around the world and affect everything, but we can affect the people closest to us and the people we
Absolutely.
come in contact with and share a sense of love and acceptance.
Absolutely. Yes.
So with that, I'd love you to tell a little bit about your extensive background, just briefly, and then some of the ways that you've used these different modalities or trainings or understandings to help others to heal through love.
Well, thank you. As I'll start chronologically, my first career as a full-time working journalist in hard news, broadcast news in London and New York, and a field correspondent for Newsweek in South America. I was a war correspondent in Newsweek during the state of siege after President Allende was overthrown, and got into trouble. And when one of my sources who was interviewing me didn't like my questions and reported me to one of the generals in the ruling junta, and I had to go into hiding and eventually escape the country with all of my notes kind of taped to my body. That experience left me with PTSD, which I didn't realize until a year or two later when I woke up underneath the bed curled up, and it was because a garbage truck had gone over a manhole cover in New York. And we didn't know very much about it, but it reminded me of some stories that I had done about people returning from Vietnam, combat stress. And so I spoke to a psychiatrist who later became a mentor when I changed careers. And he identified me as definitely having post-traumatic stress from my experience in Chile. I spent 10 years as a human rights activist and doing pro bono work, and started two human rights groups, one for journalists, one is at the Overseas Press Club Human Rights Group, and the other one is the esteemed Committee to Protect Journalists. And as you can tell, I was kind of an adrenaline junkie, and I loved that hard, fast pace of doing five things at once and being in the nerve center of global news. But eventually I burned out working the Iran-Contra hearings, and I came down with chronic fatigue syndrome, which was just being recognized as a real illness. Up until that time, doctors were poo-pooing it as depression or anxiety, but it was a real virus. And unfortunately, there was no conventional treatment for that virus. And so I began to read of the work of Dr. Herbert Benson, who was the person who introduced meditation and stress response, the relaxation response for stress into regular medical practice. And he had met with the Dalai Lama and studied how the Tibetan monks meditate and how it creates physical changes in the brain and blood pressure. And we did all the initial studies. And so I began to meditate, and I began to seek out alternative healing, Chinese healing, energy healing. And I was able to recover from that illness in 2.5 years, whereas most people were sick for 4 to 5 years. And I was very eager to get back on my feet. And as a result, I started writing, and I wrote a book called Sixth Sense, Unlocking Your Ultimate Mind Power. And that came out in 1990, and it was really the first book to look at intuition as a natural mental ability, and also as the first book or any report to explain or uncover the government's secret psychic espionage program. And it was also a book that talked about what happens to the brain during meditation and when we're having flashes of intuition. And I'm really proud to say the book is still in print after 35 years, and it's also an audiobook now, and it was featured twice on Oprah. And it is
You
considered,
introduced me to a book that was written about remote viewing,
right,
and that was amazing to me, that people can actually see what's going on in the life of somebody just through the ethers.
yes. Well, that was Lynn Buchanan, was one of the original psychic spies for the CIA and for the Army. And he wrote a book called The Seventh Sense. And I was very privileged to study with him for 2 levels of remote viewing training. And later, as I began to develop, I've worked as a therapist since 1991. I got my PhD in psychology. And I decided to specialize in helping people who were going through traumatic events, catastrophic illnesses, surviving disasters. And at the time, there was only one search engine, and it was Yahoo. And I was the first and only therapist in New York City that had a specialty for post-traumatic stress disorder, because nobody knew what it was. And it helped me to help a lot of people find me because of the listing in Yahoo. That was before Google. And so when 9/11 happened, September 11th happened, I had an office that was downtown. I was also teaching at NYU School of Journalism. So I had a lot of exposure to the dust, and I volunteered at Ground Zero. I've done a lot of work over the years with family members who lost somebody in the September 11th attacks. And I had a program for teenagers whose fathers were killed in the attack on the World Trade Center tower buildings. So this was the work with people affected by disasters. Also helped me when I lost my own home to Hurricane Sandy in 2012, and I ran workshops.
Well, just say what happened.
Well, there was a hurricane that in category, this is category 2. We had 110-mile-an-hour winds and 4 feet of water in my little beach cottage, and the whole island flooded, and actually 1,000 miles of coastline and 1 million people lost their homes in that disaster, which is sometimes called Superstorm Sandy. And I was up in the crawl space I saved my cat's life, and I was up there with my resilient and very patient boyfriend, and we were kind of looking down the stairwell, and we were watching the water climb up the stairs. And I was hoping that it wasn't going to turn into one of those Katrina moments where you see people on the roof, waving for help. It was very scary. And it took a few years, and it does take 3 to 5 years for people to, we say, metabolize or digest the impact of going through a huge catastrophic loss, like losing your home or going through a catastrophic illness or an accident. And I was able to incorporate everything I'd learned from September 11th, working with communities, to be able to work in the city hall and the local church to help people for several years after the event, because the process of dealing with FEMA and the bank that held your mortgage and the contractors and it's very complicated, and it's very traumatic, and it adds layers and layers of financial stress. Many people go bankrupt, they lose their homes. I mean, we're looking now at climate change events like wildfires in California, and people are learning that their insurance company is not going to cover them for what needs to be done to make their house chemically safe to live in. And so this added layer of trauma, of financial trauma, is something that I've helped people deal with, because it's very real.
The thing that I see you doing is every time you run into a situation, you don't just dwell on it, you help other people. You become an example and a support for other people. And I know you've done that with people who had COVID. So tell about that.
I have done that. Well, we do have a Sunday night support group for people with long COVID that we started, and I started with the Dr. Greenspan of the Pulmonary Wellness Foundation. We were the first, and we're still the longest running support group for people with long COVID, many of whom have been sick for 5 years. They got sick in the first wave of COVID, and they have neurological complications, brain fog, cancers are starting to develop, and it's a very, very complicated, and emotionally, the psychological journey of living with a disease that has so many complications is something that I've been able to continue to work with a dedicated group of women now for 5 years. And also I wrote a book called The 5 Gifts: Discovering Hope, Healing, and Strength When Disaster Strikes. And that book came out just as the Parkland school shooting was taking place, literally like the same day, which was Valentine's Day in 2018. And I was able to be part of the first responder group, helping first responders who had been on the scene. And later I developed a workshop for the teachers at the school, so that every time there was a fire drill bell and everybody was jumping out of their skin, I developed an emotional first aid program that they could use with the kids and with themselves. They told me they were really happy. Dr. Laurie, these techniques really work. Thank you very much. So that kind of, that just makes everything worthwhile when somebody.
And another thing that I know you did is when a building collapsed in Miami.
Yeah.
You went there, so tell about that experience.
Yeah, I was there kind of at the tail end of that project, and I worked with the chaplain for Miami-Dade Fire Rescue, and kind of work a little bit more with first responders who were dealing with more burnout issues at that point. I did get into the tail end of that. And, then I've been, as you may have mentioned at the beginning, I've been dealing with the aftermath or recovering from a kind of freak accident that happened last year, where I was hospitalized for a month and I couldn't walk. My right side was paralyzed, and I was able to really use Reiki and receive Reiki and prayer and other forms of healing to be able to heal and recover much more quickly.
You took a real training in homeopathy.
Yes.
How does that play into helping people heal?
Well, I took a postdoctoral course for MDs and other medical professionals, and I took the course because so many people come to see me and they want to stop taking antidepressants, or they don't want to be on anti-anxiety medications because they're addictive, and psychiatrists know that they're potentially addictive out of Xanax, for example, or Klonopin. Also, people don't like how these medications make them feel. It may stop depression, but it also stops creativity and libido, sexuality, the ability to feel things strongly. So it kind of numbs things out, which, for somebody who's very depressed is maybe an improvement. But when people come to work with me, they very often are concerned about the long-term effects of medication. And so I have a postdoctoral diploma in clinical homeopathy to help people by offering them alternatives to potentially addictive medications.
All right, and two more questions. One is about, just briefly, very briefly, like you use shamanism and you do this beautiful soul collage. So you're doing the medical thing with the homeopathy, but also something for the soul. So just talk about that.
Well, I was very fortunate. Having been a reporter in South America, I was bilingual for a long time. And so starting in like the early 1990s, I had opportunities to travel into the Amazon and high up into the Andes and into the outskirts of Rio de Janeiro, and was introduced to great, great spiritual healers and shamans who have a completely different model of what wholeness and well-being is all about. And we think of, if you're feeling sad or if you've gone through a bad breakup, that this is something that can be diagnosed and, treated with medication and talk therapy. And shamans believe that, when something traumatic happens, we often, a piece of our soul breaks off because it's too painful for us to hold on to the totality of that loss, of that experience. And it can happen, as with a breakup, it could happen with losing somebody that you love or an animal that you love to death or to an illness. It can happen with losing a job, going bankrupt. Any severe experience and looking at it from a shamanic perspective, it's a loss to the soul. It's a loss to a part of us. Just kind of, we talk about heartbreak. It's like a spiritual, approach to heartbreak. And so the shamanic practices are things that I often share with people who are going through processing loss or coping with their own illnesses as well. The shamanic approach integrates the mind, body, and spirit. And I think it adds a lot to the Western model of, standard or traditional psychology. So,
This is why I said at the beginning that it's about your lifestyle, the person you're becoming and who you are. It isn't just things you've achieved in your life. So you just keep on growing, and then the final thing, which is really what this interview was going to focus on, but I wanted to share your whole background, all the beautiful work you do and have done,
Okay.
and what led to working with animals and doing animal Reiki.
No, I wanted to be a veterinarian. I came from a very critical, abusive, intergenerational family. It was not their fault. I mean, in those days, people didn't go for therapy. They didn't have Dr. Phil or Oprah, to talk about it. So the abnormality was you had to just say it was normal. You had to learn how to navigate very explosive personalities. And animals were always very calming for me, and they would talk to me. And we would go visit somebody with my family, and then this big dog would come over and kind of look at me and sit down right next to me, and we would have a conversation. And I would say, as we was leaving, the dog says that he really doesn't like this food that you're giving him. And my parents would be very embarrassed. They'd just be, Laurie, and then they would take me out in the car and they would scold me and they would say, animals don't talk. You have an imagination. So I wanted to become a veterinarian, and in one of my elementary school classes, we had to find out, who would we write to about becoming taking up a particular professional path. And so I wrote to the Secretary of Agriculture, and this was in 1958 or 59, 58. As I was 10 years old, I was a girl, I wanted to be a veterinarian, and I got this letter back that said, we do not encourage girls or women to become veterinarians because they're not strong enough to handle, big animals. And then a veterinarian said that, in fact, veterinary schools would often try to flunk out women students by making them deliver like a calf or a pony, a foal by themselves instead of having people help them to hold the animal down. So this was very discouraging to me. I also have a learning disability. I have numerical dyslexia, so I struggled to get through math. I loved science, but numbers would reverse themselves, and so it was pretty clear that I wouldn't be able to be a veterinarian. And instead, I was encouraged to become a writer because, of course, I had that crazy imagination and I believed that animals could talk to me. But I had taken my initial Reiki in 1984 when I was pregnant with my daughter, because I'd heard that Reiki could help during labor and it could help with colicky babies. And it really was a wonderful healing tool. And my kid used to call it magic energy if she had a tummy ache. And then that was 84, 2002, I had a series of dreams. And in those dreams, I was told that I needed to pursue my Reiki training and finish level 2 and then become a Reiki master, because I would be doing Reiki with animals. And at the time, I had this very intense program for teenagers whose fathers had been killed in the towers. And I had a very busy practice in Manhattan. And I had a kid who was getting ready to go to college. So I couldn't just stop everything and start working with animals. But I did complete become a Reiki master in 2002. And I started volunteering. And I would volunteer at pet stores and shelters and places where, I would just ask them, and I would go in and I would offer Reiki to the cats or to the dogs. And the first animal where I really saw a difference was a woman. I had a little flyer that I put in veterinarians' offices at the time where you could pull the little piece of paper off. And this woman called and said that she worked at a pet store. This was on Long Island, and on Sundays, and they had a little lizard that had been abused that was in a cage. And could I come and could I do Reiki for the lizard? He said, sure. So I went in the first day and I just put my hand on the top of the cage, and this little lizard climbed all the way up to the top shelf and moved his head up like he was like lying in the sun. It was amazing. It was just adorable. And every week afterwards, when I would show up, the woman told me that as soon as I came through the door, the lizard would go up to the top shelf and be like there with his head up waiting for me. And that just opened my heart incredibly. And I continued to do Reiki with animals, kind of it really is as a pro bono activity, not, and my cat Bogart was also, cats are great healers. And so I opened his Reiki channel, and the two of us would do Reiki sessions for animals online together. And, people thought that was a little eccentric because, of course, animals don't talk. But in the last 10 years, there's been a huge revolution in animal communication. And so many people communicate with animals. And I've been privileged to study with some really great women who are animal communicators and to take additional trainings in animal Reiki, and especially a method called the Let Animals Lead, where we just offer Reiki and we don't give it. We don't it's not when you come just to a Reiki practitioner, you lie down on a massage table and you get hands-on Reiki. And this is really, it's a form of meditation where you connect spiritually with the animal using the traditional Reiki symbols. And I combine it with some of the remote viewing, also known as the psychic espionage tools that we've learned to be able to connect with somebody who is in a completely different geographical location.
And I want to say, you offered me a session, and I can meditate, but I felt this warmth in the whole abdominal area, just this warmth that I would never ordinarily feel like that. Just an expansion of the aura. And if you think that it's ridiculous, you can't do long distance healing, just think about sitting in a subway car or a bus where you're too close to somebody. You feel that energy, someone you don't want to sit next to, and you feel that energy. Or you go into a room where there's hostility in the air, or there's love and excitement, you feel that energy. So it's there. And another thing, people love their pets, love their birds and their dogs for a reason. They feel
But
that.
it's unconditional love. I mean, animals love us unconditionally. They don't care what we look like. They don't care, if we're in fact, very often, if we're not feeling well, your animal will come over and they'll nudge you, or they'll lie next to you, or they'll lie with you, or they'll lick your face, or they'll purr. I have a website, animalreikiplanet.com.
And it's listed on the page.
Thank you. And it describes, it has a little animation that shows somebody offering Reiki, animal Reiki through meditation, and explains how it works. And it has testimonials from people. Animals have really gotten better. They've healed. I was on Coast to Coast AM with George Noory, and this man in Montana emailed me that he had a horse that hadn't left the barn in a month, and he was worried about her. And could I offer a Reiki? And I had a Reiki session with the horse. She said that the thing is, animals do communicate during Reiki sessions very often. So I don't say that I'm an animal communicator per se, but they will sometimes tell me. She said she was feeling a little wobbly on her hind legs, and apparently she has arthritis in her hind legs, but I didn't know that. I just know what she described to me. And 2 days later, I got an email from this gentleman saying, "Thank you. I don't know what you did, but she's been going outside every day." And so somehow the connection that we make through Reiki is sometimes it's safe, it's gentle, it doesn't ask anything. It's kind of trying to connect with an animal in a way where they really feel heard and valued and accepted, and they're not expected to do anything. And they sometimes they say, no, they don't want Reiki. I had a horse once that said, "I don't know who you are. I don't want that." I said, "Would you like Reiki?" And she said, "No, I don't know who you are." And so I spoke to her human. She said, "How was the session?" I said, well, your horse told me that she didn't want any Reiki because she didn't know who I was and I should go away. And the person laughed and said, oh, that sounds just like her.
Well, anyway, we are coming to the end,
Okay.
and I just want to remind people that you also do Reiki with humans,
I do, yes.
and you just have so much to offer. But I would like you to just end by giving some advice, whatever you would recommend to someone who's dealing with an issue. What can they
Um,
to get more love in their life, to feel more love, to give more love?
I think that's a great question. And I can tell you from myself, like the hardest thing is for me personally, is to be gentle with myself and have compassion for myself when I'm having a bad day, when I'm not feeling well. When I'm just, I'm slow or I've got some physical issues going on. And, sometimes I will say to myself, like I'll try to see myself on the other side of the room. And I'll say, if that person was coming in to see you as a therapist or as a Reiki healer, what would you tell them? And I find that that's a really good way for us to be kinder to ourselves. See yourself as you are right now on the other side of the room and have a conversation and, ask that part of yourself that's having a hard time, or something I might say the wounded part of yourself, or the part that's just not feeling right. What do you need? How can I help you? How can I be there for you? Because we have many parts of ourself. Somebody said, that was Freud actually said, the mind is like an iceberg, and the tip of the iceberg is the tip of the self that we think of, this is me, but the majority of who we are, like the majority of the iceberg, is beneath the surface of our attention. And within the unconscious or the subconscious mind, we have many different parts. And when we're not feeling well, sometimes it can help for us to have a conversation with that part of us that just doesn't feel right, and be kind, just like we would be kind to a friend or a child or a pet. And so I guess I would say that the shortest version would be to try to be kinder to yourself in those moments when you're feeling not quite right.
Beautiful. Dr. Laurie, this is just so beautiful speaking to you. I know you for so many years,
Thank
and
you.
yet I learned many things just now that you've done that I didn't realize.
Thank you so much. I'm sorry I talked a lot, but you asked me some pretty deep questions, in the sense that there's a lot of chronology building up to what
Okay,
I'm.
it's beautiful to hear.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for trusting me and listening to my story, and for having me on as your guest.
And to those of you listening, please check out my website, relationshiphealingtoolbox.com. Click the link on this page to the Healing Through Love series, and you can get your free Principle of Love gift and be on the list to hear about upcoming interviews and events. You can also visit my main website, drericagoodstone.com, to send me a message or to find out how I might be able to help you heal through love. My parting words to you: become the love you are seeking. Find all those moments in your daily life when you can lead with love. And as Dr. Laurie said, especially for yourself and also for others. So thank you. And I
Thank
look
you.
forward to speaking to you again soon.